The night John claimed Mandy was unlike anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't rushed, nor was it awkward or cold. It was gentle, quiet, and filled with a kind of vulnerability that words could never fully capture. The evening was unusually quiet, with only the sound of the soft hum of the air conditioning filling the air. John, a 34-year-old billionaire, sat hunched over at his desk, staring blankly at the doctor's report in his hands. His sharp features, usually so full of confidence, now looked hollow and drained. The report was clear. He had only 6 months left to live. His world, once full of power and wealth, now felt as if it was crumbling around him. He had no wife, no children to pass on his legacy. All those who had once smiled in his face, his so-called relatives, were nowhere to be found now that he was facing his end. They had treated him like an outsider his entire life, only showing interest when it came to his money. Tears filled his eyes, though he quickly wiped them away, unwilling to show weakness. The cold truth stung as he reread the report. His empire, the life he had worked so hard to build, would soon belong to strangers. The thought of it gnawed at him. It was at that moment when Mandy, his maid, entered the room with a tray of tea. She had worked for him for 8 years, but she had never seen him like this. John was usually a man who kept to himself, always trying to fix his own problems, never asking anyone for help. But now he seemed like a man defeated. The energy he had once put into building his empire had drained from him. Now he was just a man with only a few months left, staring at the inevitable. Mandy set the tray on the table, her eyes catching his, and she froze. She had never seen the strong, commanding John so vulnerable. He wasn't angry or demanding, he was broken. She walked over slowly, unsure of what to do. "Mr. John," she said gently, "is everything all right?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with helplessness. He wasn't one to beg, but his voice trembled as he spoke. "Mandy," he said, barely above a whisper, "I need your help. I know this is a lot to ask, but I don't have much time. My family is gone, and my relatives, the ones who only see me as a source of money, they will inherit everything. I have no heir to carry on what I've built. You're the only person I can trust." Mandy stood frozen, her heart racing in her chest. She had worked for John all these years, seen him as her employer, respected him, but never in her wildest dreams did she think he would ask her for something like this. "I want you to give me a child," John continued, his voice breaking. "I don't have a wife, and I don't have time left to find love. Please, I need you to carry my legacy. If you do this, I promise you I'll make sure you and the child are taken care of. You'll never have to worry about anything again." Mandy's eyes widened in shock, and she felt her heart drop. The words felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just a request, it was a demand that could change everything about her life. She had never been in a relationship with John. They had shared nothing more than a professional bond. And now he was asking her to do something that went against everything she believed. "Mr. John," she said, her voice trembling, I can't do that. I'm a virgin, and it goes against everything I stand for. I can't give myself to someone I don't love. You've always treated me well, but this is something I can't just agree to." John's face contorted with guilt, and he sank back into the chair, his head dropping into his hands. He wasn't one to make such requests of women. He had always been the one in control, the one who made the rules. And now here he was, begging for help in the most humiliating way. He felt shame fill him, but he had no choice. He had no time. His legacy, his name would vanish without an heir. Desperation gnawed at him, and his voice softened, almost pleading. "I know it's wrong," he said, his words heavy with regret. "I didn't mean to ask you in this way, but I'm running out of time, Mandy. I don't know what else to do." Mandy could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt, the sorrow. She took a deep breath and turned away, her mind spinning with a million thoughts. She could not give him what he was asking for, not now, not like this. "I'm sorry, Mr. John," she said softly, "but I can't do it." She left the room, closing the door quietly behind her. As she walked down the long corridor, she could feel her heart racing. her head spinning. What had just happened? What had he just asked of her? Inside the room, John sat in silence, staring at the empty space where Mandy had stood moments before. The weight of his request, the guilt, the shame, he had never felt so lost. He was a man who had built an empire, but now he had nothing but time running out, no heir, no family, and no one to carry on what he had spent his life creating. For the first time in years, John felt truly alone. That night, Mandy lay curled up on the edge of her narrow bed, staring blankly at the ceiling above her. Her small room in the servant quarters had always been a place of peace, her quiet corner where she could unwind after long hours of work. But tonight, her mind refused to settle. Her thoughts spiraled in every direction. She had said no, she had walked away from John, but the truth was, her heart hadn't. It stayed back there in that room with him, in his sorrow, in his desperate eyes. And now, her conscience wouldn't let her rest. She thought about all the times John had shown up for her in ways that most men of his status wouldn't have bothered. Like the time her younger brother fell gravely ill and the hospital demanded a deposit she didn't have. John paid the full bill without a word and acted like it never happened. Or the quiet Christmas when her family had nothing, and somehow, anonymously, a package filled with groceries and cash showed up at her doorstep. She knew it was him. He never took credit, but she knew. "Doesn't he deserve a little happiness too?" she whispered into the silence of her room. Still, shame clung to her like a second skin. She had avoided him ever since that night, left his meals at the door, rushed away the moment he entered a room, not because she hated him, far from it, but because her heart couldn't handle the weight of what he asked, what it meant. Then one evening, she returned to her room to find a small wrapped package resting gently on her neatly folded blanket. She blinked, confused. Her hands trembled slightly as she untied the ribbon and unfolded the paper. Inside was a silver necklace, delicate and simple, with a small pendant shaped like a lily, her favorite flower. Beneath it was a folded note written in his familiar handwriting. "I never meant to put this burden on you. I am sorry. You don't owe me anything, but thank you for everything. John." Her throat tightened as she stared at the note, her fingers wrapped around the necklace. It wasn't the gift that undid her. It was the apology, the vulnerability, the fact that this man, this proud, guarded man, had humbled himself enough to say sorry. She clutched the pendant to her chest and closed her eyes. Her heart knew what her mind had been fighting. The next morning, she knocked on John's door. He was sitting at his desk when she entered, pale and tired, but still managing a faint smile when he saw her. His eyes fell to the necklace around her neck. He opened his mouth to speak, but she beat him to it. "I'll do it," she said softly. His eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure?" She nodded, stepping closer. "Yes, I thought about everything. And you've been more than just an employer. You've been kind, you've been generous, and maybe this isn't the love story people dream of. But if I can give you something real before time runs out, then I will." John's expression softened. For a moment, it looked like he might cry again, but instead, he reached out and took her hand gently. "Thank you, Mandy," he whispered, voice raw with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." She gave a small nod, her hand still in his, and as she stood there with him, she realized her life had just taken a turn she never expected, but somehow it felt right. The night John claimed Mandy was unlike anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't rushed, nor was it awkward or cold. It was gentle, quiet, and filled with a kind of vulnerability that words could never fully capture. Mandy had spent the entire day nervously pacing her room, replaying his words in her head, wondering if she was doing the right thing. She was shy, uncertain, and terrified, not just because it was her first time, but because this wasn't a fairy tale, and John wasn't a prince. He was a dying man clinging to his last hope. But when he entered her room that evening, everything else seemed to fall away. His steps were slow, his body weaker than ever, but there was something in his eyes, a look that told her he would never hurt her, never take what she wasn't willing to give. "Mandy," he whispered, pausing in the doorway, "you're not just my maid, not anymore." Those words melted her fear just a little. She nodded slowly, and when he stepped closer and gently touched her cheek, her breath caught. His touch was warm, trembling, as if he too was afraid, as if he too was stepping into unfamiliar territory. He took his time. Every movement was delicate, like he was memorizing her piece by piece. He kissed her forehead first, then her lips, asking without words if this was truly what she wanted. She responded not with words, but with a soft nod and tear-filled eyes. That night, John didn't just take her body. He made her feel seen, cherished. She was no longer just the woman who changed his sheets or brought his breakfast. In his arms, she was more. She was important, wanted, trusted. 2 weeks later, everything changed again. Mandy stood frozen in the bathroom, staring down at the pregnancy test. Her hands trembled violently as 2 pink lines stared back at her, bold and undeniable. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, her chest heaving with shock, tears sliding down her cheeks. She was pregnant with John's child. Her mind whirled with emotions, joy, fear, disbelief, wonder. But in the center of it all, there was one steady truth. She didn't regret it. She waited until afternoon to tell him. He was resting on the couch in his study, his skin paler than usual, the toll of the sickness clearly showing in the lines on his face. But the moment she stepped in, he looked up, and somehow he knew. "Mandy?" he asked softly, concern lacing his voice. She stepped closer, gripping the test in her palm. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then John's lips curved into a tired, beautiful smile. His shoulders slumped with relief and his eyes welled with tears. The following week, John called in his lawyer again. Mandy sat beside him, watching as he signed document after document with hands that shook from weakness. Then he handed a folder to her. Inside were the final drafts. His will, a trust fund for the baby, property titles, everything. "I want you to have it all," he said. "You and the baby, no one else." "But John," she whispered, tears rising, "you don't have to." "I do," he interrupted gently, "because this isn't just about money. It's about making sure you're protected, that our child is safe. I don't know how much time I have left, Mandy, but I do know I want to spend every minute loving you both the best way I can." She pressed her lips together to keep from crying and reached out to hold his hand. In that moment, Mandy realized she had become something far more than a maid. She had become his peace, his reason, and maybe, just maybe, his home. Each evening, Mandy would sit beside John's bed, guiding his frail hand gently over her growing belly. It became a quiet ritual, one of the few things that brought a soft smile to his tired face. His fingers would rest there, barely strong enough to apply pressure but steady enough to feel the tiny flutters of life. He'd close his eyes, and for those few moments, there was peace. He was trying, desperately trying, to hold on long enough to meet their baby. "I wish I had more time," he whispered one night, his voice so low she had to lean close to catch the words. Mandy pressed her lips together, nodding slowly, fighting the burn of tears behind her eyes. "You're here now, John. That matters." That night, something felt different. He seemed more alert, his eyes clearer, though his body remained worn down by the sickness that had taken over. After dinner, he asked her to help him sit up. "There's something I need to give you," he said softly. From the drawer beside his bed, he pulled out a small box. His hands shook as he held it out to her. Confused, Mandy took the box and opened it. Inside was a delicate ring, silver with a tiny sapphire stone, not extravagant but full of meaning. "I know this isn't the usual way," he said, his lips twitching into a faint smile, But I wanted to give you something before I go. She stared at the ring, her breath catching in her throat. It's a promise, he continued, that I'll always be with you, in your heart, in Aiden's smile, in every moment you feel lost. You gave me a reason to fight, Mandy, and I'll never stop being grateful. Her hands trembled as she slid the ring onto her finger, blinking quickly to keep the tears at bay. Thank you, she whispered. I'll treasure it forever. He leaned back slowly, exhausted from even that short moment of emotion. She tucked him into bed, adjusting the pillows just right, brushing a stray strand of hair from his forehead. He looked peaceful. I'll be right here if you need anything, she said, sitting in the chair beside him. John nodded, eyes already starting to close. You're my peace, Mandy. Don't ever forget that. Those were the last words he spoke. In the early hours of the morning, Mandy stirred in her chair to the stillness of the room. The usual soft sound of his breathing was gone. She stood up quickly, stepping closer, dread flooding her heart. John lay there, eyes closed, face calm, almost like he was just resting. But his chest didn't rise. His hands were still. He had passed quietly in his sleep. The silence that filled the room was deafening. She reached for his hand, tears sliding down her cheeks as she whispered through broken sobs, You kept your promise, John. You stayed as long as you could. The ring on her finger caught the morning light, and in that simple glint, she felt him still with her, even in absence. She kissed his forehead gently and whispered goodbye. Though her heart shattered, she knew he had left her with more than just a child. He had left her with purpose, love, and a legacy she would carry forever. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the weight of John's final wish, the depth of Mandy's sacrifice, and the beauty of love born in the most unexpected way, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe to this channel because here, stories aren't just told. They live, they breathe, they heal, and they remind us that even in the darkest moments, love can still bloom. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more powerful tales that will stay with you long after the screen fades too. Also watch the next video on the screen. It's another interesting story on our channel.